Okay, so good morning, everyone. Today we are talking about TAM, SAM, and SOM. So TAM, SAM, and SOM are all about market sizing. Okay, can you see the slides?
Yes.
Okay.
Yes.
Okay. So the reason why market size is so important is obviously the bigger the market that we're going after, the higher the growth rate, the compound annual growth rate of the market we're going after, the easier it is going to be to get market share. Okay, so for those of you who haven't really looked at the size of your market and the growth of your market, how quickly your market is growing, this is basically the lesson that will cover that. Okay, so what I've done is I'm going to go through TAM, SAM, and SOM, what they are, what they mean, and then we're going to look at that through two case studies that I have completely and utterly made up. Just one of them happens to be on a gin company, so I know that we've got you know, a gin company on the course, but I've just literally sort of just, you know, done the research on Tom, Sam, and SOM on that. Right, so let us begin. So first of all, you know, in terms of what we're going to go through, why size matters. The reason why size matters is that, you know, imagine boats in a harbour. You've got big boats, you've got small boats, right? But basically, when the tide comes in, all boats rise. Okay, so those small boats rise exactly the same as the big boats. So by focusing on areas of the market that have a high compound annual growth rate, you are much more likely to be able to grow. Okay, now I don't want you to think about compound annual growth rate just in the focus of your product. Okay, so you'll probably notice, you know, there's kind of trends on social media, or, you know, there might be a buzzword at the moment. It's obviously AI. Just because you don't have AI in your product doesn't necessarily mean you can't market and lean into, you know, areas that are really growing. So, you know, if there is an opportunity to, you know, tag in whatever Taylor Swift's doing, or whatever, you know, whatever's happening in AI, then obviously that just maximizes your market. So think about compound annual growth rate in the broadest sense. So let's say you're a marketing company. What does AI mean for the future of marketing, right? This is, you know, so don't think about it just in terms of your product. And then I'm just going to go through, so I've made up this gin company called Flora Gin, and then I'm just going to talk about learning technologies, just to give another example of, you know, how Tom, Sam, and SOM work. Okay, so this is the confusing slide at the start, which basically breaks down, you know, the different areas. So right at the very top, okay, you talk about the total addressable market. Okay, now nobody, you know, starts off with the idea of the total addressable market for the entire world, but it's good to know the size of your market. So whether you're in learning technologies, whether you're in, you know, e-learning creation, whether you're in marketing, it's a good idea to see from a global point of view, or a country point of view, what your total addressable market is, right? So how big is that market? And most importantly, is it growing? Okay. The next area you've got is, look, I can't possibly take on the entire world. As much as I would like to take on the entire world, realistically, I only have the resources, you know, available to me, that are basically going to allow me to access the serviceable addressable market. And even the service addressable market is probably a long-term, you know, element to your marketing plan. You need to start somewhere, which is your service of obtainable market, and this is what your resources can basically do to penetrate that market. Okay, so but the important thing is that you are leaning at all times into the highest compound annual growth rate segments that you can find. Okay, and we think about this as product, price, place, promotion. Okay, so those are the things. Your competitors will be looking as well at the highest compound annual growth rate segments, but that doesn't mean to say that you shouldn't double down on them anyway. And you see this happening if you get your competitors' newsletters and things, you will see this happening, and it's bizarre when it happens. So obviously when AI first started coming through in the world of growth engineering, you can see our competitors saying, we know all about AI, we are, and you're like, you just don't. We went out trade shows when AI first came around, this a couple of years ago, and it's like, we're AI enabled, and you're like, you're just not. You're absolutely just not. And so the point isn't whether you necessarily got the product or whether you necessarily have got the skills. The idea here is that you are showing that you know what's going on in the market, and you are leaning in. You're taking an interest in those segments of the market that are moving the quickest. Okay. And by understanding and constantly listening to what the market is saying in terms of, this is where I'm growing, this is basically, what we're finding the most exciting, this is where innovation is happening, we are able to find innovation opportunities within the 4 Ps, right? Product, price, place, promotion, right? So if you just look at AI, okay, the impact of AI on our business, obviously we've been able to create AI products from the ground up. That's fantastic. We've been able to market into that. So all of my thoughts leadership now has to do with AI and how it impacts human development. We've been able to maximize pricing because the growth rate of AI is much higher than in other sectors, so we'd be able to get bigger margin, and obviously place is the same, but we are able to do B2C as well as B2B. So you can see how leaning into high growth, whatever it might be, it might just be trends, it might be like whatever trend makes, there's lots and lots of trends. I mean, all you need to do is go on to, X or any of these things, and you can see the trends that are currently, moving through. So it doesn't necessarily have to be a seismic, change like, AI or the arrival of the internet. It can be smaller things that you loop your marketing onto in order to get, maximize the reach. So this is basically what we're going to talk about today. So what is the total addressable market? And again, I'm going to go through a case study on that so you can see what is the serviceable addressable market, and then what is the serviceable obtainable market, okay? So that we can really look at this. And then that all drops down into where innovation should happen, into the 4 Ps. So product innovation, price strategy, distribution channels, and marketing strategy. And this will allow you the opportunity to be a small boat in, a place where the tide comes in, the highest, in the bay, right? Because this is what we want. We want more impact for the same amount of time, effort, and energy, right? And that is really why we look at compound annual growth rates. And this is why, I've always been slightly obsessed with them, because, if you can find markets that are growing more rapidly, then obviously you can continue to grow and you can continue to, profitable as you move through. So that gives you a kind of an overview of what we're going to be discussing in this particular unit. Okay, so here we have a lovely company called Flora Gin. Okay, totally made up. There is a gin company, on the call with us, but I was just kind of inspired by, well, gin. Quite frankly, I love my alcohol, so I thought, right, well, let's just do it on that. Right, so here we are. We're going to do market sizing for Flora Gin. Okay, so let's just situate who Flora Gin are. Okay, so Flora Gin are a startup craft gin company based in Andorra. Okay, they have a kind of unique positioning because they basically are using local flora and fauna from Andorra to create this botanical gin, because Andorra is a stunningly beautiful place with beautiful flora and fauna, and we don't have a gin company here that I know of. And so the target market is, this is a premium product. It's not, a cheap gin product. It is a premium product, and it's a craft. It basically, it's created for people that are guests. gin enthusiasts and you know, craft cocktail people, right? And the differentiator, and you're beginning to kind of imagine this beautiful gin that, you know, I'm imagining as well, is all about the fact that Andorra has, it's in the mountains, you know, it's where Heidi lived. It's just the most stunning place. So we've got pristine water and we've got these fabulous mountain botanicals that can only be sourced in Andorra. Okay, so that's the concept, and hopefully all imagining what I'm imagining, which is the most amazing botanical gin that just looks stunning. Okay, so the total addressable market. First of all, let's look at the total addressable market. So if Flora Gin was able to basically bang straight go to the entire world, okay, and sell its product, it would be looking at a market gin size of 15.6 billion. It's a huge market. It's a huge market. But then the question really is, well, how big is it growing? And how big is this gin market growing compared to other products, right? So what's happening to tequila, what's happening to vodka, what's happening to some of those other spirits. So that's the kind of thing that any investor is going to be looking at. They're going to be looking at, is the gin market, you know, in growth? And also, what is the trend of the gin market? So is 7.2 you know, a good tracking medium for that market, or has it, you know, is it down against last year? Obviously if it's down against last year, then that's not great. But you want to be looking at the overall annual growth rate. Okay, so for the gin market on a global basis, it's been going at 7.2%, which is pretty damn good. Then you're looking at what are the key market drivers. So then what we need to do is say, okay, well, it's a big market, right? It's growing, but where is it growing? Like where within the gin market has got the highest growth rate? And there what we're seeing is it's premium, right? So you don't want to be having cheap gin and basically, you know, that's not where the growth is coming from. Definitely it's this idea that, you know, gin, you know, is almost like a luxury experience rather than, so it's really leaning into this kind of craft cocktail, you know, the whole idea of, you know, putting things in the gin that, you know, maximize and change the flavor. But it's more like a leisure product than it is, you know, just a simple kind of drink. There's obviously a growing interest in nature and natural beauty. So that's a key theme that's driving this market forward. You know, people aren't just drinking gin and tonics. This is like the world of, you know, all sorts of exciting stuff that you can put in your gin. You know, there's, you know, gin bars all over, you know, London. So clearly, you know, it is something that is capturing the imagination of consumers. And then the other really great thing is you've got rising disposable income in those key markets. Okay, so just to review, you're looking at the total addressable market. Okay, so you're looking at, you know, the total amount of gin worldwide, but then you're looking at the key drivers. So where is it growing within the total addressable market? Okay, and you want to do trend analysis on that. Okay, so you want to see, is my market generally getting bigger or is it generally getting smaller? And what are the things that are influencing, hopefully, that growth? You do not want to be in a market that is not growing, because you have to work a lot harder than everybody else in order to grow at the same pace. So this kind of total addressable market, this TAM figure is really, really important, especially if you are going for investment. Well, that's all well and good, isn't it, right? But we're not all Jeff Bezos, right? We can't, you know, take money for the first 18 years of our, you know, corporate journey and basically just flood the market with, you know, a new product and then hope eventually we'll be able to, you know, get profitable. We actually have to, you know, make money along the way, right? So now we're into, look, Flora Gin is not going to be able to penetrate the Japanese market. Like, it's just not going to be able to do that in its first couple of years. It might in its third year, or if it gets a distributor. But let's just say, for the purpose of this, Flora Gin thinks that they can probably focus on the European market, but not even the entire European market. Okay, for those of you who don't know where Andorra is, it's a tiny, tiny little country sandwiched between France and Spain, and we're smushed together in the middle of the Pyrenees. So realistically, okay, if we've got to go knocking on doors to basically get this into high-end hotels or however we're going to start distributing it, we're not going to be going to Germany. We're not going to be going to the Netherlands. We're not going to be going to the UK even. We're basically going to have to start off local, right? So realistically, what is our serviceable, addressable market? Okay, so now we're coming into the zone of, right, so in and around me, my environment, what can I actually do to service this market in, let's say, a 5-year horizon? So it's not immediate, but it is actionable. It's realistically actionable. So the focus really has got to be Andorra first, right? We need to basically, get the people in Andorra to really be, enthusiastic of the gin, and they should do, because it's the only Andorran gin. It should be an easier market to sell into. Then you've obviously got France, and then you've obviously got, Spain as well. So, both of those are, opportunities for us to just jump in the car and go and talk to people about, this extraordinary product that we have developed that nobody else has developed before. Now, that is a dramatically smaller market, okay? So, as we saw before, the total addressable market is 15.6 billion. But in the European gin market, it is only 2, okay? But then you get down to the population in Andorra, France, and Spain, you're only talking about 110 million, okay? So we've gone, right from the very top to actually, something more that is realistic in terms of, whether we're going to be able to sell to that market. And then we do a deeper dive, right? Right, okay. And now remember, tomorrow's lesson is all about buyer personas, okay? So this, I want you to really think about this as, first of all, we're looking at the highest possible area. So the biggest market we can target adjacent to our product, then the serviceable addressable market, and then we're going to go down to, literally the market that we can target. And then tomorrow we're going to do some buyer behavior profiles. And so it'll be those markets. But we have to start with the highest compound annual growth rate, the markets that are growing the fastest. Because if we just look at our buyer profile, right, but not from a high growth, which ones are, growing the fastest, what we might do is end up basically focusing on people we think we can target, but maybe they haven't got as much money as other people within that market. That's why we have to start here before we get to the individual buyer personas, which we're going to do tomorrow. Sorry, I missed that question. Can somebody just tell me what the question was? Oh, sorry, I've got it here. When it comes to B2B, are we addressing both ways? Yes, we are. Yeah. So basically, it's both B2C and B2B. So you should be able to, again, just shove it through Claude or Open API or whatever you're using as your AI, and it should be able to tell you what the key trends are, what's happened in your market, the total addressable market, and it will easily be able to tell you the Tom, Sam, and Som in those markets. So yes, absolutely do that. And also remember, there will be different things. So when I think about, iridescent and Zavmo is a business consumer product. What is driving innovation in that market is, the rise in tutors, the rise in whatever. What is what the market is demanding and what's happening in the world of iridescent, which is selling into B2B, is, large corporates are basically wanting, better ways of training up their people. So those are 2 different separate markets, because obviously consumers buy in a different way than businesses do. So, if you've got one business, but you're selling to 2, then you will have 2 sections of the market. However, the key drivers will be the total addressable market, right? You'll still see growth in that. Okay, so let's just go back to the serviceable addressable market. So here we know we're going to start off with Andorra, then we're going to drive over the border, a little bit into France, a little bit into Spain, see what we can, zhuzh up. Now, who are we focusing on? Who are we targeting? We're targeting premium gin, customer demographics. They're going to be urban professionals, because these are people with a bit more money, right? Those people that are slightly older may not want this craft gin experience. It may not be so much of a leisure experience they're going after. We want them to have high disposable income, and they've got to have an interest in craft spirits. So that automatically begins to let us know, right, okay, so basically, where are these people going to be, right? And this is the serviceable obtainable market, right? This is basically what you are going to do. So this is literally crafting your buyer behavior, your buyer personas, and we're going to do that tomorrow. Okay, so you've gone down from, I want to focus on the highest growth, compound annual growth rate, then, you know, potentially where I could go in the future, but now how am I actually going to start attacking it? Okay, so we've said, right, from 11 million, I think we said, so 110 million is the service addressable market. We believe that we could probably get to a target of 2.1 million. Obviously, you know, might need a bit of investment to get there, but, you know, that's kind of realistic. We're going to try and do 300K in Andorra. We're going to try and do 800K in the border region. And because the Spanish absolutely love gin, and we've got Barcelona relatively nearby, we reckon we're going to do 1 million in Barcelona, and they love their gin. Right, how are we going to attack, how are we going to get to these high loving, you know, gin, lovers of craft gin? Well, where are they going to be? Okay, where are they going to be? Well, where they're going to be is they're going to be in premium bars and hotels, and they're going to be in other kind of high-end retail stores. Or we're going to create a or we're going to create a beautiful website which basically gives craft gin recipes and, you know, creates you know, a feeling of almost like, you know, a club nature of how wonderful this brand is. And we are going to go direct to the consumer, and we're going to drive that through our socials and drive that through our marketing. So this is basically leading us down this path of, you know, focusing on the highest growth market, then bringing it down into, you know, where the product could potentially go in the future. And then it's bringing us to like, all right, where do I start with this strategy? So if you are looking for finance, and if these are key metrics that every venture capital company will look for, right? But overall, you are going to have a lot less sleepless nights if you have a high compound annual growth rate market that you are selling into. It is just a lot easier. So if I think about my personal career, for example, when I started work out of university, there were two really hot areas, right? One was recruitment, getting into recruitment, and the other one was getting into, you know, IT basically. And at that time, the internet wasn't, you know, born, but by basically leaning into these high growth areas, which were growing, you know, all in double digits, much faster than other, you know, industries like retail or whatever it was, I was able to much more quicker, you know, get promoted and get paid more, quite frankly. And so this idea of basically focusing on high growth markets, even if you don't have your own business, is still a really important fundamental grounding. You want to go where the money is. You know, there's that great story where, you know, the most famous bank robber in the UK was asked, you know, sorry, not in the UK, in the US, was asked, why do you rob banks? And he said, well, that's where the money is. And, you know, really, without getting to brass tacks, you want to be leaning into, you know, where the money is, rather than, you know, trying to, you know, and you can shape and shift your business to focus on markets that are growing the fastest, right? So it might not be that you have a product that is, but it might be that you can shape and shift your products to target those people that are most likely to be growing fast and have a need for your products and services. So this analysis of compound annual growth rate is just really, really important, because, you know, by basically harnessing what is naturally happening in the market, you're much more likely to be able to, you know, reduce the risk of what you're doing. So basically, then when, you know, you start looking at how the 4 Ps are affected by the highest CAGR metrics, these are the kind of things that you want to be looking at. Okay, so what we have seen is the areas of the gin market that are growing the most are growing the quickest, right? And again, all of this is on AI. So, you know, all you just need to do is, you know, ask ChatGPT the question, you know, what areas within my bigger market are basically spearheading the growth. Okay, so this isn't anything that you need to, you know, worry about actually doing. So in the gin market at the moment, the areas that are the most high growth are botanical variations. So basically you can sell gin for higher if you've got botanical variation. Limited editions, people love limited editions. They might be interested in things like mountain herb infusions, and, you know, collaboration with local herbalists, which will certainly help your marketing as well as your product innovation. So you can see here that the compound annual growth rate impact for premium gins. These are the figures. So although the overall gin market is growing at 7 point some whatever we said, within that the premium gin market is growing at, you know, 9.4. The sustainable packaging segment is growing at 12.6, and the local ingredient trend is 8.7, right? So all of those metrics are above the average growth rate. And again, these are the kind of things that we want to understand in order to lead our product innovation. Not what our gut is telling us, but actually what the market, what areas in the market are actually growing. Price, okay? There's always, you know, things happening in the market that basically define the price points that are going to be the most attractive, not only for consumers, so what people think is the amount that they would prefer to be paying. Now, more is not necessarily more for consumers, because if you are aligning, you know, an experience, a gin drinking experience with more leisure than you are, you know, just a quick gin and tonic at home, if it doesn't cost the right, you know, price, then you're not going to think that basically you've got that experience. So you need to think through price, because it's not just about cost in the mind of the in the mind of the consumer. So the premium pricing strategy overall in the market, and again, you can do all of this through, you know, ChatGPT or, you know, any AI that you're using, is between, you know, 45 and 55 euros. And really what you want to be doing is, because you've got these artisanal elements to the brand, and you're working with, you know, herbalists, and there's a really interesting story going on with Flora Gin, it's basically going to be even more expensive than that, because, you know, you're going to have special edition pricing and all of those kind of stuff that are going to really beautifully allow you to talk to your market and tell stories and interweave interest and curiosity about this kind of journey that not only Flora Gin are going on, but also their, you know, their customer advocates. And this price driven growth, so this, you know, the special edition pricing, right, the more expensive pricing, is even more higher priced. So the premium segment is growing faster than standard. It's growing at 15%. Okay, so, you know, yes, you have to sell less, you have to produce less, but you have to sell it at a higher price. So all of that comes with, you know, a set of marketing standards around it that needs to be, you know, perfect and bang on. But however, to maximize, you know, where you want this gin brand to go, you're going to be looking at that premium price. And the wonderful thing is again, the markup. So the direct to consumer markup, if you get your website looking really, really beautiful, and you're leaning into all of these themes, you know, teaching people about craft gin, teaching people about Andorra, teaching people about, you know, herbs and spices and how they react to diffusion with alcohol. And you're really giving them experiences, you know, you're really trying to grab them in with your socials, and you're asking people to upload their gin recipes, that is obviously going to give you an additional 25%. So every single bottle you sell, you're going to make more money on it, which is what it's all about. Going back to what we've said, you know, time and time again on this course, it's not about revenue, it's about profit, right? So basically we want to make more money with, you know, less trouble, effort, and energy. And in this particular market, the high-end stuff is the stuff that's going to maximize your chances of doing that. So now we go into place, right? Distribution. Okay, so where are we going to sell it? Where are we going to sell it? And again, we always come back to, within the distribution for the gin market, which are the highest growth areas, right? And again, we can ask ChatGPT or Claude or whatever, you know, where is the money in this market? And what it will tell you is the place for the highest growth rates in this market are luxury hotel partnerships, because obviously they're charging more for their gin. The craft cocktail bar experience, direct to consumer, and of course the fact that, you know, Andorra is duty free if you buy it in, you know, Andorra, and that may or may not be something that you could link in with local hotels in Andorra, so when tourists come in they can basically get their gin, you know, duty free. And again, look at the compound annual growth rates, right? We can see here the e-commerce. So people do buy gin online, and that market is really growing compared to the average gin market, right? So e-commerce sales are 22% in terms of, you know, normal retail sales. This is great. So this is a big justification for when you look at your, you know, initial budget, and when you look at where you're putting the you know, the resources, you're going to look and say, right, well, e-commerce is absolutely, because it's driving harder than normal retail sales, we need to be investing more money, because obviously that's where the money is, right? Then luxury hotels, that is growing at, you know, 8.5. Remember, the overall average growth rate is 7, right? So it's still on the higher end. So we still know that selling into hotels is still, you know, above the chances of other gin manufacturers coming into the market. So it's still a good place to go. And then the duty free market is, you know, absolutely hopping if we can get it into duty free in Andorra and, you know, some of the other duty free places, maybe in France and in Spain. So that is, you know, driving where we should be selling our gin. And then finally we come on to promotion. Okay, so what we've learned going right from the very top is the growth in this market is coming from people's interest in, you know, Andorran culture, Andorran mountain spring water, Andorran, you know, love of flora and fauna. And the craft gin market is the area that's growing, right? This is a premium market. So what does that mean in terms of promotion, right? Now we know all of that. What does that mean to where we should be focusing our promotion innovation? Well, of course, if the interest is coming from, you know, understanding, you know, all about Andorra, you know, the botanicals that are specific to Andorra, we need a botanical education program. Maybe we could have like a club. Maybe we could have like, and of course, all of that is, you know, builds loyalty, builds passion, you know, for you know, for the company and brand loyalty, right? So we're going to have a botanical education program. We're going to get people from Andorra to be talking, you know, about, you know, their experiences with, you know, the different herbs and et cetera, and people are going to be really interested in that. That's going to go down really well on our socials. Then we're going to have, you know, some mountain to glass storytelling. So, you know, we're going to have journeys like some of the, you know, story themes that we had in one of the sessions last week. You know, people are going to go up the mountain. We're going to, you know, film them as they go up the mountain. They're going to show us different herbs. And then we're going to take that all the way through into, you know, how we basically make a really fine cocktail by adding in a slice of lemon, etc., or whatever it might be. We're going to have sustainable practices because, you know, that's what people want. And because we're going for this craft market, right, where people are really, really interested in the product, the best way of us doing that, the most efficient way of us doing that marketing is digital first engagement, right? We don't need to do, you know, we don't need to basically employ anybody else to do that storytelling for us, because this is what we're passionate about, but also that's what people are interested in. So there's this beautiful like overlap between how can you get an agency in to basically walk up a mountain with you and show you, you know, talk to you why, you know, you basically pick this herb and the botanicals. It makes so much more sense for you to do it yourself. So, you know, basically digital first, you know, it's all going to be about, you know, connecting with your market. And then there are other things that you can do after that. So how about, you know, getting the Prime Minister of you know, Andorra to talk about, you know, I don't know if he's got a big social media presence, but we've got loads of social media people here in Andorra. So we could do some influencer partnerships. Well, look at that engagement rate. That's really, really high. We could do virtual distillery tours. You know, again, that could be part of a specific club. And we can obviously do, you know, sustainability content. So, you know, again, all of these growth rates are much higher than the average. Okay. So I hope you've been able to sort of see, you know, see how by looking at the compound annual growth rates and kind of letting it filter through, we can then be a lot more assured of our kind of 4Ps strategy. Because ultimately, if we are not focusing on the highest growth areas, we are making ourselves work harder for less, right? And that's just simply why we really do need to be really cognizant of what the industry trends that are happening globally, but also in our industry. So kind of in summary for, this Flora brand, in order to maximize the chance of this brand getting, off the ground, we have really done market analysis. Well, Claude's done it for me. And this is basically where we've arrived at. And we've arrived at looking at the market from a global point of view, and then we've filtered that all the way down into the impact that will give for our small micro business that is just starting out. So we believe by pursuing this strategy, by leveraging Andorra's unique botanical heritage, we're going to be able to get into the door of some really fancy exclusive places. We're going to start building the story, building the narrative. We're going to target the highest growth channels first. And through that, we're going to be able to build a real premium identity. We're going to solidify that in Andorra before we move out into other markets. And so as a consequence of understanding the growth in the market and how we are basically filtering that down into product, price, place, promotion, we are then able to put some realistic targets based on the overall compound annual growth rate from a global point of view. Is that clear how we've done that, right? And then tomorrow we're going to be looking at buyer personas specifically. Yeah, great. Okay, so this is another example I wanted to give you, not of pure innovation. Okay, so when we look at Flora Gin is basically a startup in terms of my case study. Okay, the Flora Gin on the program might not be a startup, but basically what I just wanted to show you is how you do product extensions. Okay, so if you look at my world, so my world for the last 25 years has been in the learning management platform space. Okay, so we sell learning platforms to the biggest global companies in the world. That's our focus, and it's been very much on kind of engagement. And what a learning platform does is it takes standard learning processes that happen within organizations and allow companies to track it, essentially, right? So it's a process management tool. So it is managing the learning of your staff, and we obviously put gamification around that and all sorts of good things. Now, the good thing for Growth Engineering, which is the company that I've been building for the last sort of 21 years now, is that market has solidly grown by a decent compound annual growth rate. Okay, so going back to where I first started my career in tech, I have always been very lucky. Am I the brightest person in the? No, I'm absolutely not. Am I the cleverest? No. I mean, in no way. It's just when I started my career, I was in a high growth area, and so through having a high growth area, I then jumped into launching a company that happened to be in a high growth space. Then we did gamification and social, which again, was leaning into the big trends. And luckily enough, that market is still growing at a decent clip, right? So as markets get bigger, their percentage rate obviously, so you've got to look at two things. You've got to look at the current global size. So the LMS market globally is 18.8%, and the traditional market is growing at about 14%. Right. About 18 months ago, I started a new company because I was really interested in what was happening in the AI space, particularly with regards to personalization. So I was really interested in how we could create a learning platform that was kind of fundamentally based on the individual. And of course, you can only do that with AI. That's what, is the beauty of this new technology. So what's happening in that industry? Well, first of all, the AI learning platform is much, much smaller than the current LMS market. Okay, it's much smaller because it's only just started and we haven't got as many competition. People haven't entered the market yet, right? But what is really good about it is the AI learning platform is growing at a much, much bigger rate, right? So practically double, if not more, than the LMS market, right? So by having by looking to the future, by looking at the growth rate, you can see that the current AI learning market very, very quickly is going to be bigger than the traditional LMS market. Eventually it will do. So by moving into the AI learning space, not only are we building on, a traditional market that's got, a compound annual growth rate of 14%, we're also adding on, bigger areas of growth, which we can, upsell and cross-sell within the existing, in the existing company. And this is a classic example of utilizing, opportunities in the marketplace in order to maximize the compound annual growth rate of the market that you're going after. So, basically, if you look at the next level, okay, so the why of what we're doing, right? So when you look at the market projection, we can see that, traditional market projection is still looking really good. So the LMS market, is dropping, but it's still, it's a bigger market. Whereas AI enhanced platforms are going the other way. So if you are an LMS platform that is not going to put on any AI, features and functionality, then obviously your market share will grow. Will decline. That's just unfortunate fact of the market. However, if you are a platform that's going to go AI first, you're going to grow more quickly than your competitors. And again, all of this information doesn't come from me. It literally comes from Claude and OpenAI, right? It's all out there in the market. So for my business, it's exactly the same for your business. You just ask the questions and these are the answers that you get, okay? Now, the other question you might ask is, well, why? So let's say you say, well, AI is just a widget. I mean, it doesn't make any difference, does it? I mean, it's not particularly effective in terms of learner engagement. So then you start digging into the why and going, yeah, but the reality is that with traditional learning platforms, you get an average completion rate of about 45%. Whereas with AI enhanced, because it's personal to you, you're having a conversation with the AI, which is in and around, their learning experience, your average completion rate goes up, which means the return on investment for your client is much, much better. So what's driving this, massive, growth in AI is not to do with, AI is, it's being driven by the fact that AI works better in the learning environment, right? So you can't really, there's no real way out in terms of, the focus and the future for the LMS or the learning market has to be AI, which is why, competition is going to ramp up, and we need to have first mover advantage in that. And then also, when you're looking at the kind of promotion element and, how you're basically communicating the why to clients instead of why you're moving into AI, you've got things like, improvement in test scores, cost per student, comes down because it's more efficient and effective. And this is literally the great capitalist market doing its creative destruction. So, it basically knows that, if there is better outcomes for students, ultimately the market response will change, because ultimately the product is solving the problem better than it was, right? So this is basically what is driving that. So, in terms of, then you go, okay, right, well, that's all well and good, but everybody and their dog seems to have some sort of AI, AI bolts on, right? And when we went around the trade shows, you could see it was literally just rubbish. I mean, people go, I've got AI, I've got AI reporting, you just haven't. I mean, you're not even using a large language model. You just haven't. You just said that, you're using AI, but you're just not. And people that know AI obviously know that, that's just not true. So let's talk about where the innovation within the learning market is happening, right? Because AI in its holistic nature, just as when we saw in the Flora case study, you can't just say, well, the gin market is growing. You need to double down and go, well, what is of interest to our particular market in the area of AI? And what is driving that in, according to Claude and OpenAI at the moment, is not content creation, right? There's a lot of AI content creation. Who cares? We've got enough content, in around that. Well, it is on there. It's not on the list, but it's not number one. Is personalized learning paths. So that's the first high growth driver. So if you're basically kicking off your marketing saying, hey, we've got AI enabled personalized learning paths, that is, you know, growing at, you know, 45%, you know, compound annual growth rate, which is a huge growth rate. Then you're going down to AI tutoring, right, which is 38. Then you're doing automated assessments, which is 36. And then it's going into content generation and predictive analysis. So all of those are super, super high compound annual growth rates. So again, just to be really, really clear, it's not, is AI growing? That's irrelevant. It's how are we putting that highest growth rate we can find and putting that in to, you know, basically drive our innovation roadmap. So the strategic implications when any market changes, or when you have any, like, for example, in going back to our botanicals case study, there's been a big movement for, you know, leisure and kind of craft cocktails, you know, into this kind of more leisure and experiential, you know, so I'm going to drink outside the house, but I'm going to have this wonderful experience drinking gin, right? So the strategic implications for anybody in the gin market is that they want to start innovating with, you know, new botanicals and new ways of basically getting that customer, you know, a unique experience. So in the same way, we have to ask, well, what are the strategic implications for, and the good thing about this particular case study in the learning market is this is all technology products. So whether you're doing, whether you're in marketing automation, whether you're in, you know, sales CRM, it doesn't make any difference. You know, it's pretty much everyone needs to be looking at AI if you are operating in the tech space or near the tech space. So the strategic implications are those companies that do not, you know, integrate or create, you know, AI options on their platform will just slowly die, because that's where the market is moving. So if you're unable to basically, you know, create your own AI because you can't afford data scientists because they are damn expensive, then we need to partner, solidly partner, in order to take advantage of that growth market. We need to focus on data infrastructure because that's where the intelligence will come back. And, you know, ultimately, all of this is predicated on is, do the people within your organization understand AI? Because obviously you can't ask them to basically do more AI if they don't understand, you know, the overall kind of structure of what AI is and what the benefits are and how the AI works. So, you know, we have a collaboration with growth engineering, and at the moment we're going through a whole process of trying to upskill the people in growth engineering in terms of how they would sell, you know, an AI first product, because they've never sold it before, right? So, you know, that's obviously, Zavi, would you mind getting the gate? Sorry. You know, when I said, let me just shut the door, I'm sorry about this. I did say, please don't get any Amazon deliveries, but this is Andorra, and getting Amazon deliveries. Oh, babe, you're going to need my card. Babe? You're going to need my card. I think there's 3 packages. Sorry about that. I've broken my own rules. I do apologize. So anyway, where were we? Right. So, you know, what does this mean in terms of strategic applications? So those people who already are in the market, they need to basically either you know, create AI products, or they need to partner. But also, what is the opportunity for new people coming in? Well, of course, the growth is fantastic. So first mover advantage is beautiful. You're going to make big impact in a really short period of time, because people are still confused as to what this actually means. So the first mover advantage does mean that you'll be able to charge more, you'll be able to come, you know, you'll be able to basically make headway as a leader. And, you know, it's just a very exciting time if you started thinking about, you know, creating those platforms, you know, whatever, a year ago. So in terms of, you know, what new entrants should be, you know, focusing on, it really is about personalization. And this personalization is nothing really to do with necessarily what AI is capable of. It's to do with the way we learn. So again, you're leaning into that emotional resonance bit, right? So remember, at the beginning of the course, we were talking about the why. So why is, you know, personalized education so much higher impact? Well, it's because it's all about me, and it really does hit that emotional resonance. I've got this crafted learning experience, which is just for me. And then, of course, in and around that, what we're looking to do is ensure that the insights that we get back from, AI are multitudinally better than linear, databases. And so obviously we're going to be building a strong data strategy, which hopefully will allow us to, link in with customers for the long term, because of the way the data works and all the different data points we can collect with AI, and the meaningful analysis we can basically deliver to our customers off the back of that. And again, it all comes back to, let's focus on the highest growth market, because you can be not, you can be not quite as good, but if at the end of the day, you're leaning into the markets that's growing the fastest, it's going to be really difficult for you not to win out in the end. So basically, as we kind of, finish up this particular session. So tomorrow we are going to utilize what we know about, the growth of the market and where the growth is coming from, to identify specific buyers. Okay, it's not good enough to basically target even our addressable market. We need specific people within that market, and we need to be crafting conversations that really have that emotional resonance with those buyers. So tomorrow is the day we're going to start looking at how we create emotional relationships with buyer personas. So we're going to craft our buyer personas tomorrow. So just in terms of key takeaways, we always start with, the biggest moving, right? So start with the global market, narrow it down to realistic targets, and then within that, focus on the highest growth segments, right? Obvious, but, lots of companies don't do it that way. So they end up making decisions about over the 4 Ps that they could do a lot better with. Then we need to make sure that our innovation strategy is absolutely wedded to where the growth of the market is going, unless you don't want to grow. Like, of course, there is always that, I'm just going to stick my head in the ground, and you know what, I know where the market is growing the highest, but I'm just going to stick to what I know, because for some reason we don't know. But anyway, so if you want your business to grow the quickest, you should really focus on the biggest growth rate in order to build sustainable advantage. First mover advantage is really, really powerful. So looking at where the growth factors are coming from, and being that company that pivots and moves into where the margins can be high, where the turnover is going to rise the fastest, is going to be a good way of you staying in business and protecting yourself against those 5 forces. Because remember, those 5 forces are coming towards you all the time, right? So pivoting, innovating through understanding where the growth is coming from is your best chance of succeeding. And then, of course, when you're doing these things, as we learned from the Lego case study, some things don't work. Okay, some things don't work. So let's not pile everything into it. Let's find some easy ways to test out the market, to test out the innovation that we're doing, in order to basically see whether we have the competence and the market has the readiness to buy that off us, right? So we're not suggesting that we pivot entirely and go, right, okay, let's stop doing what we were doing and, bring in a whole, we're saying do it in a measured way, but make sure you know where you're going, and you should be going towards, the highest, the highest growth rate areas. Okay, so that is it from me. So hopefully you're starting to get an idea of how we are structuring this course, right? So we've gone from sort of big ideas, and we're starting to narrow it down. Now, tomorrow is a really important session because we look at buyer personas. We can't begin to think about, whether our website is fit for purpose, whether our branding is fit for purpose, whether our marketing communications are fit for purpose, whether our customer love bomb advocacy strategy is fit for purpose, unless we understand our customer, right? So tomorrow is a really important session where we are going to be putting images, and we're going to be putting descriptions to our buyer personas in a way that we can really, really go to the next level, which is, right, the devil's in the detail. What am I saying? How am I taking my personal why and my organizational why and turning that into something that I can communicate to the highest growth opportunity for me and my market? So yeah, that's it for today. One thing that I would really encourage you to do as well, which I thought was really helpful, is I know a lot of you were really inspired by the Simon Sinek, you know, golden circle why thing. So I actually asked Claude what my personal why was based on all of the articles and stuff that I've done, because I work with Claude all the time. And I thought it was fascinating because he completely nailed why I'm so interested in this, you know, subsection of technology and, you know, the theory of learning, which is, you know, what I am interested in. So he kind of nailed my personal why. And then I also said, well, based on that personal why, because it sounds really good, how about giving me some articles that I could write about, which would be, you know, really interesting to me because it's about my personal why, but would also lean in to, you know, what we're trying to do in terms of the growth rate in the market. And so it was just another idea I thought I'd throw out there, because obviously if you're writing articles or Claude's writing articles for you, or however you're doing your, you know, your content creation, if you're leaning into what you're already passionate about, it's a lot easier to do. So yeah, so I just I did that, and I just wanted to share that with you. So before we, are there any questions? Has everyone been able to put in their homework on the chat? If you want the group to review it, you're more than welcome to pop it in the chat. You don't have to, but hopefully, yeah, you're getting value from the course and you're able to keep up. All good. Okay, well.
Thank you. See you tomorrow.
Yes, look forward to seeing you tomorrow. Have a great week, guys. Take care.
Bye.
Thank you.
Thanks, Julia. Thanks everyone.
Bye.
Thank you.